Most people think Buffalo Bill, the fucked up and tucked up character in the movie Silence of the Lambs, was based on the Butcher of Plainfield, Ed Gein. Or maybe you thought the character was based on Green River Killer Gary Ridgway, or even Ted Bundy. All interesting theories, my friend. But let me cook one up I think could be even better. The murderer who kept 6 women chained in a pit in his cellar and forced them to torture each other. Oh yeah, and he also may have compelled his captives to eat each other. Sound like anyone else you know?
How could a guy who practically had a billboard over his head that said criminal psychopath get away with such horrifying crimes for so damn long?
Tonight on Crime Takeout, House of Horrors killer Gary M. Heidnik.
It's a fascinating and disturbing story. I'm sure you'll love it like everything we do here at Crime Takeout, so make sure to like and subscribe. Now, on to the good stuff. Before we begin, a quick word from our partner and the writer of this episode, who also happens to be my mom. By D.M. Murphy presents supernatural suspense thriller Down, 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 the first novel in the Beckler trilogy by author D.M. Murphy. When Richard Keene, a prominent tech tycoon, goes missing, private detective Mike Beckler is called in to solve the case. But what begins as a routine investigation quickly spirals into a dark, otherworldly mystery, as Beckler and his team are plunged into a terrifying world of murder, mythology, and magic. With its gripping plot, vivid imagery, and pulse-pounding action, Down, Down, Down is a masterful piece of fantasy storytelling that'll keep you on the edge of your seat from beginning to end. Down, Down, Down is available today in print, ebook, and audiobook editions, narrated by yours truly, at bydmmurphy.com. That's bydmmurphy.com.
Hello and welcome to Crime Takeout, where every single episode we dish on the greasiest, spiciest, most despicable cases in the annals of true crime. All while we chow down on some succulent carry-out cuisine. Tonight, I'm munching on Chinese takeout from Dragon Palace in Charleston, South Carolina. Starting out with some spring rolls, moving on to some veggie fried rice for my main course, and then finishing off with a carry-out classic, the fortune cookie for dessert. So if you haven't already, grab some grub, crack a brew, kick back, and get ready for one killer meal. We begin, as always, with our starter.
Vegetable spring rolls, golden fried, shredded cabbage, carrots, peppers.
That's good.
Salty, garlicky. Ooh.
That's some good shit right there. November 25th, 1986, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA. Josefina Rivera is a skinny, 25-year-old Puerto Rican-American woman. Her friends say she looks like Diana Ross. On this night, Rivera's walking down Front Street parallel to the Delaware River when Rivera sees a Cadillac with a white man inside slowing down to look at her. The man leans out the window. "Are you dating?" he asks. He's got piercing blue eyes, wavy brown hair, his beard is trimmed, and he's wearing a fringed leather jacket. The guy tells her he's too tall to comfortably have sex in the car, so he wants to go to his house instead, which is really close by, and he'll give her $50. Rivera's 25, she's used drugs since her teens, and prostitution is how she supports her habit. All Rivera hears is $50 to buy crack. So she breaks her own rule of not going home to guys' houses and gets into the car with Gary M. Heidnik. When they arrive at 3520 North Marshall Street, Gary's house doesn't match his fancy car. First warning signs. Gary stuck dimes, nickels, and quarters all over the walls. And in the kitchen, it's thousands of pennies from floor to ceiling. The stairway to Gary's bedroom is also wallpapered in money. This time, singles and 20s. In her memoir, Rivera writes that the sex is mechanical and overfast, which is fine with her. She's up and dressing, ready to get back to Front Street. Rivera's pants are halfway on when an arm clamps around her neck. She tries to scream, but she can't get any air. Her vision dims. She's about to pass out when suddenly the chokehold loosens. Her arm is pulled behind her back. Click. Handcuffs. Gary drags her screaming down the stairs into a windowless basement while music blares from a radio. By the glow of a single bare light bulb, she sees a freezer, bags of dirt, and a hole dug out of the concrete floor. Gary shackles Rivera's ankles with muffler clamps and chain. With a padlock, he attaches the chain to a sewer pipe, and only then takes off Rivera's cuffs. Gary tells her to climb into the hole, but it's too small. So he pushes her head down until he can slide a plank over the opening. Then he weighs it down with bags of dirt. Later, Gary comes back with a cup of water and a blue air mattress, grabs a shovel and starts digging the hole deeper. Gary says the army tested LSD on him. He wants to have a baby farm with 10 women chained in the basement. He's the bishop of his own church. Who the hell is Gary Heidnik? And where the hell did he come from? Gary was born in 1943. As a kid, he was bullied and teased for being a freak. He never made eye contact, had a weird-shaped head from falling from a tree, and had an IQ of 148. Brilliant! Whenever Gary wet the bed, which was often, his dad would punish him by hanging the soiled sheets in the window for the neighbors to see. Suicide was a family interest for the Heidniks. Gary's older brother made several attempts. His mother, Ellen, an alcoholic, succeeded by drinking mercury bichloride, and Gary would go on to try and fail 13 times. At 17, he joined the army. There, he trained as a medic and was stationed in Germany. In 1962, however, recurring headaches, nausea, and dizziness caused Gary to get transferred to a military hospital in Philadelphia, where doctors diagnosed schizoid personality and recommended Heidnik be discharged.
Son of a bitch, I stained my shirt.
In Philadelphia, Heidnik became a licensed practical nurse. He was regularly fired and also hospitalized for psychiatric care. So, in 1971, the obvious thing for Gary to do was open a church, declare himself bishop, and hold Sunday services out of his house. He started investing his disability checks in the stock market using the church's tax-exempt status. He eventually grossed $500,000 tax-free dollars.
He also started looking for a wife, and during this time had babies with at least 3 different women, all of whom would ultimately leave him for being a creep and take the kids with him. At one point, he was arrested and sent to jail for 5 years after it was discovered he'd kept another woman in a bin in his basement.
I want to have kids, he told Rivera. Lots of them. I got kids already, but the state keeps taking them off me. Well, I got a way now of having kids, so nobody can take them away. You're just the start.
Veggie fried rice with tofu. Got some fried rice with tofu, broccoli, sprouts, baby corn.
Oh, yeah. Very good. All right. Okay.
A second day passes, and the nightmare continues for Rivera, but at least Gary's left her out of the hole.
When she hears his car leave the garage, she knows this may be her only chance to escape. Rivera searches the basement for a way out. In a corner near the ceiling, she finds a small door leaking fresh air. Quickly, she tries to loosen the shackle on her right ankle. After half an hour, it gives way, but the left one isn't as easy, and time is ticking. With one leg free, Rivera yanks the door off and pulls herself up through the narrow opening and into the dirt crawl space under Gary's house. The chain has enough slack that she's out of the basement, but she's still not out from under the house. She starts screaming, "Help! Please help me!" She hears voices coming from the front of the house, but no one answers. Desperate, she grabs a stick from the ground and beats a nearby fence so hard it starts to fall over. Rivera keeps yelling and beating until, without warning, the clamp digs into her ankle. Gary pulls Rivera back into the room and calmly explains that no one's going to save her. The only people outside are drug dealers, and he pays them to mind their own business. Try something like this again, and not only will you fail, but I'll kill you. At long last, on day 3, Gary brings Rivera 2 slices of white bread and water. Soon after, she hears him drive away. In her memoir, Rivera writes, "Gary leaving the house was scarier than him being in the room. What if something happened to him while he was out there? This hole would be my grave." But Gary does come back, and this time, he's not alone. When the basement door opens, it reveals Gary dragging a sobbing woman with him. At 25, Sandra Lindsay was a patient at the Elwyn Institute, a home for the developmentally disabled where Gary got her pregnant. Her caregivers helped Sandy get an abortion, and this, of course, made Gary furious. With the shackles in place, Sandy's nightmare begins, as Rivera's had days earlier. Soon, he brings a portable toilet to make their new home more comfortable and permanent. A portable coffee pot and tea bags are another luxury Gary provides. And later on, Gary generously brings a battery-powered TV. But after watching the TV for 2 hours, the women discover it seems to be eating up their oxygen. They agree they'll have to ration their watching habits. Sandy's sister Tess and her 2 cousins become worried when Sandy doesn't come home after a few days. Tess even bangs on the door of the house on North Marshall Street, where the man who runs the church in his living room lives. They give the police Gary's address and spell his name Heidaike, Heidike, not Heidnik. The police don't bother going to the Marshall address and instead run the misspelled name, and because it turns up nothing in their database, they write her off as a runaway. A few days later, the Lindsays get a letter written in Sandy's handwriting and postmarked from New York. "Dear Mom, I am fine. I am in New York and I'll get in touch with you soon. Don't worry. Love, Sandra." By the time Gary gets back from posting the letter in New York, the 2 women are so relieved to be fed and let out of the pit They're babbling with joy. Without thinking, Rivera tells Gary it was such relief to hear his car pull into the garage. "You could hear me?" he asks. Gary goes upstairs and returns with a handful of screwdrivers. He forces Sandy's head to the ground, flat on one cheek. Then he pushes a screwdriver hard into her ear. Then he turns his screwdriver to Rivera.
With Christmas growing near and 2 women already in his baby farm, Gary decides he wants to add more.
19-year-old Lisa Thomas is walking down the street when a car slows down. The driver tries to pick her up like she's a hooker, and insulted, she yells at him. She's not turning tricks. She's just going to a friend's house. The man with the fringed leather jacket apologizes and offers her a ride. Once more, the Cadillac pays off. The next to enter the cellar is 19-year-old Deborah Dudley. She fights and shouts all the way to the basement and keeps on fighting, too. Jacqueline Askins is 18 on January 18th when she sees a big white Cadillac rolling by and a hooker about to climb in. And she yells, "Don't pick her, pick me." Now Gary has 5 women in his basement. When Gary leaves the house, he always gives one woman the job of snitching on everyone else. If she doesn't name names of women who misbehaved while he was out, he beats them all. Sometimes Gary also bangs on the door when he comes home and shouts, "This is the police." And if the women scream for help, he beats them for that too.
Rivera has been in this hell for nearly 2 months. She's missed her period, and she's scared to death she's carrying Gary's baby.
She's constantly thinking about how to escape, but the only plan she thinks will work is to earn Gary's confidence, and that takes time. Rivera, now in survival mode, begins to assist Gary, even in torturing the women. Often allowed in the upper part of the house, Rivera seems like a traitor to the other women. She's even gone on a few errands with Gary. Dudley has plans to get away too, but she wants to kill him. She tries to organize the other women for the plot, but Rivera argues against it. How are they going to get away if Gary's dead? He leaves the key to the padlock upstairs, and without that key, there's no way to free the chains from the sewer pipe. If Gary dies, so do they. After 2 months of committing horrifying crimes, including kidnapping, unlawful restraint, and rape, Gary finally graduates to murder.
On February 7th, 1987,
Gary hangs Sandy by one wrist from the ceiling to punish her for eating too slowly. He makes the other prisoners beat her with a stick, while her neck crumples against her chest, closing off her windpipe. The meek and mentally disabled Sandra Lindsay, 24, dies of asphyxiation while chained to a pipe. But dying is unfortunately somehow not the worst thing to happen to Sandy. The next morning, the women wake up to a horrific odor. The whole neighborhood smells, and neighbors call the police, who arrive and bang on Gary's door. The door opens and Gary answers calmly. He blames the stench on a burnt dinner, and the officers leave without checking Gary's kitchen. After they leave, Gary brings Debbie upstairs to the kitchen. She sees Sandra Lindsay's head boiling in a pot on the stove, her ribs cooking in a roasting pan, and her arms and legs in the freezer. Debbie is pissed. She wants to kill the bastard now more than ever, and again tries to organize the others. Askins is with her. But somehow Gary finds out. A week later, he fills the pit with cold water, cuffs Debbie and Jackie together, and puts him in the hole. That's when everyone realizes why Gary is holding an extension cord with exposed wires. "Don't worry," he says. "It's just a little shock. Nothing too bad. I just gotta get you both to straighten up a little." The women plead and scream, but he shocks them anyway, sending an electric current zipping through the water in the pit. Gary turns to Rivera, handing her the wire. "Now you do it." After Gary leaves, Rivera bends down to the pit and whispers, "Are you both okay?" They are. The jolt wasn't that bad. But 2 days later it is. This time, Gary puts the wire to the chains first. Within seconds, Debbie is no longer a problem. She's dead. Ironically, Debbie's tragic electrocution turns out to be just what Rivera needs to begin executing her escape plan. After Debbie's death, Gary orders Rivera to write the following note.
I, Josephina Rivera, and Gary Heidnick killed Deborah Dudley by applying electricity to her chain while sitting in a pool of water in a hole in the basement of 3520 North Marshall Street.
Then, he tells Rivera she doesn't need to be handcuffed anymore, because the incriminating note makes it so she can't go to the police. Rivera's done it. She's convinced Gary she's his accomplice. For the first time since Thanksgiving Day, Rivera has no shackles. And for the next 3 days, she'll play a bizarre role as Gary's girlfriend and his partner in crime.
She travels with Gary on 2 separate field trips to the New Jersey Pine Barrens. First to scout a remote location, and then to bury Debbie's remains. However, despite making several stops in public at diners, she decides not to run for help, but to instead patiently wait for the opportune moment to make her escape. And then it comes, when Gary says he wants to kidnap another girl.
As casually as she can, Rivera agrees, adding innocently, "And then after that, I want to see my family. Give me a chance to talk to them and explain to them what's going on, that I've got an old man and we were away, smooth things over. And then I'll come back and get you and you can meet everybody." And that's when the man with the IQ of 148 says, "Okay, fine," setting in motion his own downfall. All right, let's see what we got here.
Fortune cookie.
In the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity. By the time 911 gets a call from Josefina Rivera on March 24th, 1987, she and Gary have kidnapped another woman, Agnes Adams, and dropped her back at the house. Gary's waiting at a gas station while Rivera goes to tell her family about her new boyfriend. At least that's what Gary thinks. In reality, Rivera hurries to a payphone around the corner. According to former police officer David Savage, "We responded to a female, Josefina Rivera. We met her at 6th and Oxford. She told a bizarre tale of being held captive and chained up and people that were in a basement. She said, 'He's up the corner at 6th and Gerrard.' John Cannon, Savage's partner, adds, 'I said, well, let's see if Mr. Gary's up there.' And sure enough, there was a Cadillac just like she described. We got out, approached, ordered him out of his car. The girl came down and said, 'Yeah, that's him. He raped me and killed these 2 other girls, and he had me eating her bones. He cut up this girl and put her in a pot and made us eat her. She said other girls were still in there, down in the cellar in a hole.' I said, 'Wow.'" When police arrive at Marshall Street, they finally see the house for what it is, intimidating. It has bars on the windows, the doors are metal. Inside, the TV's so loud the cops cover their ears. And on the first floor, officers find in the kitchen 6 plastic bags containing human body parts. An article from the Chicago Tribune describes the scene. In the freezer were 24 pounds of body parts, mostly arms and legs, wrapped in plastic trash bags. A fragment of a body was found in the stove, and substances that could be human were found in a bowl in the refrigerator. And when they go into the cellar, they find half-naked girls screaming in joy that the nightmare has ended. They screamed, "We're saved." The trial of Gary M. Heidnik begins in June 1988, and defense attorney Chuck Peruto decides on a legal insanity defense. Peruto has the usually well-groomed Heidnik grow his hair out and stop cleaning himself. Heidnik adopts a far-off stare and doesn't react to anything said. Peruto also leaks to the press hints of cannibalism to bolster his case. On the other side, prosecutors point to Heidnik's successful stock investing as evidence of his sanity. In a UPI article titled "Heidnik's Church Alive and Well," they reported that on Sunday, April 12, 1988, 50 parishioners meet for services, even though their bishop is in prison. It also claims services were held in the house while women were chained in a dungeon below. Despite the fact that a neighbor claimed most of the parishioners were mentally disabled, it's a report that's still hard to fathom. On the 1st of July, 1988, after 16 hours of deliberation, Gary Michael Heidnik is sentenced to death and transferred to the State Correctional Institution in Pittsburgh. And 11 years and 5 days later, on July 6, 1999, Heidnik drinks 2 cups of black coffee and eats 2 slices of cheese pizza before he's executed by lethal injection. He has no last words, but after he's declared dead, one witness murmurs, "Thank you, Jesus."
Thanks so much for tuning in. To go even deeper inside this fascinating episode, be sure to check out the bonus conversation after dinner drinks between me and my mom who wrote the episode. If you're a true crime fan, I know you're going to like it.
Can you fathom what Josefina Rivera did? She had to essentially play double agent.
I can relate to 2 of the characters, Josefina Rivera and Deborah Dudley, who was just the opposite, lost her kibbles and was so freaking angry. To her, it was worth it even if she had to die.
In the meantime, be safe out there, and we'll see you next time on Crime Takeout.